Today, we have a special guest. We have a gentleman, he goes by the name of Dr. Stuart Murray. He's one of the best consultant anesthesiologists in our region. Dr. Murray, welcome to Investor Lifestyle Jamaica. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Glad to be on your YouTube channel, is it?
Yes, sir.
All right, good.
Yes, Doc. I just want to ask you, how did you get started in the field of medicine? And I know that you're someone coming from the grassroots and working your way to the top.
All right, indeed. I would begin to say that this sort of journey, not only for me, but for many other professionals and many other persons, working in whatever field, it usually begins as a young person. What is it that you would like to do with your life? What is it that inspires you? What do you see yourself being or becoming? Or what is it that you like? What are the skills? What are the talents that you have? So all of these little things are very, very important in terms of determining the pathway that you take. And also role models, again, play a very, very important part. So from my part, I can remember very, very distinctly at maybe age 6 or 7, visiting a doctor close to where I lived, and the manner in which the doctor treated me, how friendly he seemed, how inviting, all of those things I found very, very impressive, as an impressionable child. And what the icing on the cake was at age 6 or 7 is that when he finished dealing with me, nothing painful, very, very kind, gentle, engaging was that particular gentleman. When he finished with me as a little child, he gave me a lollipop. That was just the icing on the cake, literally and figuratively.
Okay.
So I found myself very, very impressed with that experience, and I think it was from that sort of early age that the idea came to my mind, that is what I want to do, that is what I want to be. And I think that had stayed with me right throughout childhood, going on. So I think once that became something that was lodged in my mind, I started working towards that end. My mother was someone who was also very, very influential, certainly in my education, certainly in my life. I mean, she's now deceased many years. She always stressed the importance of education. So education was very, very important. You have to study your book. You have to go to school. You have to make sure you do well. You do very well as you can. So that was a familial, important area, meaning it wasn't just my mother, it would be like my grandmother, uncles, aunts had that sort of mentality. Their children must go to school, must do well, and so on. I suppose it helped that my mother was a teacher. So, teacher pick me. Not they help to teach you as
true.
well. So, she was very, very, very instrumental where that was concerned. Certainly when I got to high school, and in high school, I suppose a higher level of study compared to primary and prep school would begin. Because I wanted to do medicine, clearly I had to gravitate towards the sciences.
Yes.
And that is what I did. And, did well enough in high school. Back in those days, in 5th form, I did O levels, and then in 6th form, I did A levels. I know now it is CXC and CAPE, right? But a similar sort of exams, and based on that, I got into the University of the West Indies. At that time, medicine was highly competitive, very, very competitive, and relatively few persons would probably get into medicine straight from high school. So myself and others, we who wanted to do medicine, having not gotten into medicine straight from high school, we went to do a science degree, or we started off the program to do a science degree. In those days, it would have been called natural sciences. Nowadays, it is called something else. I'm not fully up to date with what the science degrees currently at the university are called, but yes. And it so happened that after the first year of natural sciences, again, myself and many others would have applied to get a transfer to medicine. And at that point in time, I was successful and got into medicine, which was one of the high points, because this was the start of something that I had dreamt of pretty much all my life, all my young life at that time. So did medicine. It was a 5-year program, which doesn't change that much. It is still a 5-year program. I mean, there have been changes, yes, but in the main, you cover the same bases. 5 years, so I did my 5 years successfully, did my exams, graduated, and then thereafter, you became an intern. Now, of course, back in those days, internship used to be 2 years. Nowadays, it is 1 year. So that was a little bit different. So I did my 2 years internship. At that point in time, I was not absolutely sure what I would have specialized in, truth be told. Because as you know, there are very many fields, many fields to choose from. But whilst I was doing my internship, especially during the second year of internship, there was a 6-month period which we called an elective period, where you were allowed to do anything you wanted to do. If you could get that position in any specialty, any area. And one of the things I said that I would do was to do intensive care, anesthesia and intensive care in my elective. And my rationale was that, watching TV, back then as it is now, you had a host of TV shows about medicine and doctors. And one of the things that really came across to me was a doctor should be able to respond in an emergency situation, knowing what to do, how to resuscitate a patient, how to support them if somebody would happen to collapse and drop down right in front of you. Clearly, as a young doctor, as a young intern, those things seemed very foreboding, very daunting, because you're still a junior doctor, and you probably felt that you would not necessarily have the skills to deal with that situation, even though, you are quote unquote a doctor. So I said, you know what? I want to master some of those skills. And I thought that the best way of mastering those skills, to deal with emergency situations, was to do a little stint in anesthesia and intensive care. So that is what I did. And once I started it, got involved in it, started learning the necessary skills to resuscitate, people in an emergency. It sort of grew on me, and I began to understand the breadth and the depth of the field, and I, decided, you know what, this is something I could dedicate my life to. So, I continued in that field even after internship. So having completed internship and having completed one of the early exams in the anesthetic program, I almost fortuitously ended up in England. And it is a very, very funny story. I actually went to England just on a holiday to visit family, and perhaps a few friends. It was supposed to be like a month-long visit. Of course, as usual, nowadays, similar to what it is nowadays, Jamaicans are all over the world. America, Canada, UK, and other places. So once I got there and linked up with my family and was having, a good time making old acquaintances, because some family members I wouldn't have seen for many years, I found out where many of my colleagues who had previously left were working. So I decided to visit one of my colleagues. This is all in the London area. So I called him and said, what you doing, where you at, and that sort of thing. He gave me all the information, the direction. So I went to look for him. And having gotten there, you know, talking to him about how things were in England, it transpired that he was in fact working in the anesthetic field.
Okay.
All right, because I had encountered him in Jamaica working in the anesthetic field when I had started in anesthesia, but he had left, you know, a little bit before I did. So having encountered him, you know, we're talking, and he was, you know, full of praise and glowing recommendations about the system here in England. Out of the blue, he said, "You don't want to come work here?" And I said, "Huh? Excuse me?" So yeah, man, there's a job on offer now, you know. Why don't you apply? And, you know, thought about it a little bit, and I said, "Okay, what? There's nothing to lose. Let me apply."
Yes.
And I applied, you know, within a few days, got a response within a few more days, and you know, and got the job. So that is how my sojourn or my continuing journey unfolded in England. So I literally had to write back to Jamaica, apologize, letter of resignation, and some of my bosses or professors were so gracious that even though I had resigned in such a precipitous manner, so good was our relationship that I could turn around and ask them for recommendations at the same time, because you know you need referees whenever you're applying. So I got a reference, good reference from one of my professors in anesthesia, which I think paved the way for me getting that job. And having gotten that job, you know, that was the next segment in terms of my journey in terms of the anesthetic field. So it turned out that I spent a total of maybe 4.5 years in England in that field, and further studies. There were 3 exams that we needed to do. So over those years, I did all of those exams, was successful in those exams. We moved around quite a bit because I probably ended up working at 3 or 4 hospitals over
in London?
Yes, in London, in and around London.
Okay.
And you know, got the requisite experience. As I said, did the requisite exams, and that is how I became qualified and experienced as an anesthetist.
Okay.
I never intended to stay in England at all. It was always my intention to come back to Jamaica, right? I never intended to stay, because home is home as far as I was concerned. I mean, whilst I was there, I married my wife, Jennifer, and it was also her own mindset that, well, you know, we're just here for a while, we're going back home. So I made all the necessary plans to come back home, applied to the government service whilst I was in England, got a job in the government service here at Spanish Town whilst I was in England. And it's you know, a bit of a bittersweet story because no, I tell you why it is bittersweet, because yes, I wanted to come back and I was excited to come back, but one of the reasons why I wanted to come back as early as I did, you know, I could have spent another year or 2, you know, and widen my experience and that sort of thing, earned a bit more money because you get, you know, pay was much better. Yes, exactly. But one of the things I desperately wanted to do was to come back because my mother was sick. My mother was suffering from cancer, effects of cancer.
Okay.
So I said, boy, you know what, I need to come home to be close to her, to support her. And we lived, or she lived, which is where I used to live as a youngster, in the Spanish Town area, in Ensom City. So I said, you know what, it would be good to work near to home. Exactly. So that is why I chose to go to Spanish Town Hospital. So came home, settled down, and started working as a consultant anesthetist at the Spanish Town Hospital. And basically I've been there for, you know, more than 20 years, probably 25 or more years. Is how long I've been there as a consultant anesthetist. And yes, that in a nutshell has been the journey to where I am now.
Yes, thanks, Doc. captivated by a story. Just want to dig deeper. What is anesthesia, and could you mention to viewers in terms of the pain management? Because there's an aspect in terms of it relates to pain management in anesthesia.
Right, that is true. That is true. So anesthesia, most persons would perhaps have an idea of what anesthesia is, because most persons would be, or many persons would be aware that, boy, if I'm going into the hospital to do surgery, I'm going to have to get an anesthetic.
Yes.
All right. So for them, they need, when they're going to be doing surgery, they have to be put to sleep in order to do whatever surgery it is, whether they're coming to have a hernia repaired, or whether they're going to have, a broken bone operated on, whatever surgery it is. They realize and they know, they expect that they would have to have an anesthetic in order to be able to do that particular surgery. So that would be what most lay persons would be aware of. The word anesthesia basically means without sensation or without feeling.
Okay.
All right. And anesthesia widely is probably divided up into sort of two areas. General anesthesia, which is what most people are aware of, meaning you'll be put to sleep, or you're knocked out,
yeah.
So you're rendered unconscious. So you don't know, you're not aware of anything that is going on. And then there's another branch which is called regional anesthesia. That is the one where you may be kept awake and a part of the body is rendered deadened.
Yes.
Right? Many people find that very, very daunting and say, boy, I'll be awake and surgery is going on. Me no want to see nothing, me no want to hear nothing, kind of thing. Exactly, So some people might stay away from that one. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have some people who say, boy, doc, I'm afraid to go to sleep, because I'm afraid, say, if them put me to sleep, me now go wake up. And when I tell them that, well, you have an option, we don't have to put you to sleep. Them say, all right, more want the one day. So I can be awake while it is going on. So you have different things which appeal to different people. So those are the sort of two branches that are that I can tell you about. One of the important things, though, which many people might not know, is that whichever one that is being undertaken, for the purposes of safety, there needs to be a lot of ongoing, continuous monitoring of blood pressure, pulse, heart rate, oxygen levels, and all of that sort of thing. So the anesthetist, needs to be there and right, by the patient while all of this is going on. Right? Because especially with a general anesthetic, in order to keep somebody asleep, many times you might have to put them on a breathing machine, administer oxygen through the breathing machine, as well as administer other drugs or gases that keep the patients asleep. So we have to be very, very closely monitoring the patient while all of this is going on. And added to that, when the surgery is going on, there's so much that can happen. There can be a lot of bleeding, which you have to be aware of. So if necessary, you have to be transfusing the patients or giving them other, what you call intravenous fluids, to maintain stability, make sure that they stay very, very safe and solid while these things are going on. And another important part of anesthesia is what happens when surgery and anesthesia is finished, meaning we call that the recovery period. That is also a very, very critical period where you have to keep a very, very close eye on the patient, because there are various things that can happen, and you need to keep a very close eye on them to prevent any untoward events at that point in time. So that is one side of anesthesia. Anesthesia nowadays also encompasses what is called intensive care or critical care. So anesthetists sometimes will be involved in ICU or critical care, where patients are on life support or what you call respiratory support, to support their breathing, or other forms of support of vital organ systems. And then another area that anesthetists are involved in is the area of what you call pain management.
Yeah.
So those are sort of three broad areas. Anesthesia, intensive care, pain management are the sort of areas that anesthetists or anesthesiologists would be involved in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Side effects, and how can these side effects be reduced?
Okay, so any procedure, right? Any medical procedure that is being carried out, any drug that is being given, and this is a general thing, not just for anesthetists. Any procedure that is going to be done, medical procedure, any drug or drugs that are given, can and will have side effects. All right, that is just a part and parcel of the whole sphere, the whole field of medicine in its widest sense. Usually, as far as drugs are concerned and as far as procedures are concerned, both experience and research would have shown the doctors over years that, when you are given this medication or when you are doing this procedure, these are some of the things, these are some of the adverse effects, these are some of the side effects that can occur. So side effects, complications are well known just for, as I said, any medication that you give and any procedure that you undertake. And it's the same in anesthesia. Of course, it is a very, very wide spectrum, because I don't know how many people, I'm sure not many people, but when you go to the pharmacy and you pick up any medication, if you take that little paper that is within the box and read it, and I'm sure many people do, it was take out the paper, throw it away and start to take the tablets. If you read it, it will list out, the risks, side effects, complications of medications. And sometimes that list is a very, very long list. They might list 20 or 30 things that can happen as a result of taking that particular medication. And this is what they have found out through experience and through many, many studies. The good thing, though, is that for most medications and for most procedures to be passed as okay, to do or okay to take, be approved by the various authorities, it would have to be that those things are considered safe enough, meaning that the side effects and the complications are rare enough, are not very common, because if they were too common, we would say no. It don't make sense trying to take this thing or do that thing. So all of that is taken into account. So even though you see that long list of side effects, in general, those are very, very rare occurrences, certainly the severe ones. If it is a mild side effect, so for example, many drugs might cause the stomach to feel bad, or might cause you to be a little bit drowsy, that sort of thing, or those side effects are mild side effects, which some people might say, well, they are expected and they're not severe, so it's not a big problem. But certainly as far as it concerns severe side effects, those have to be known to be rare enough or not common enough for it to be, for that drug or for that procedure to be thought of as safe. From the point of view of anesthesia, because the three areas of greatest concerns for anesthesia are what we call the cardiovascular system, that has to do with your heart and your heart, your blood pressure, and the blood flow to various organs. That is one of the things that we have to be watching constantly, because that fluctuates during surgery, or it can fluctuate during surgery. If a patient loses a lot of blood, sometimes that can cause the blood pressure to go down. So effects on the cardiovascular system, the heart, the blood pressure, is something that we have to be acutely aware of, because that can be one of the effects of both anesthesia and surgery, because the two, go together. The other area has to do with your lungs and your breathing, right? Because when you're unconscious, great pains have to be taken to make sure that enough oxygen is getting into your system, because you're now unconscious and you're not really in control of your breathing or your respiratory system. So we have to take very, very great care to make sure that that is safely conducted. So that side of things can also be a complication, meaning for whatever reason it may be that your oxygen levels might be running low, enough oxygen is not getting into the system. So that sort of thing can pose risks and complications as well. So those are two of the main areas that we have to be very, 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 very careful about.
Okay. And is there a need for more anesthesiologists? Is that the correct term?
Right, yeah.
Is there a need in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, for more persons in that area?
I think that there is. I suspect that many years ago, the need probably was greater, but that gap between what we need and what we have, I think, has closed significantly. Especially since we have been graduating many young doctors. Certainly in the last, 10 years or so, the capacity of the university has expanded, because they've expanded the medical intake, the intake at medical school significantly. So we are graduating far more doctors now, certainly over the last 10 years, which means that, when they have qualified, have done their internship, there are more doctors who are now available to go into the various specialties. Yeah. So I think the gap is closing. I would not say it is closed yet, because I still think there is a significant need for specialists in general, and in particular anesthetists in Jamaica and in the wider Caribbean. So yes, there is a need for a few more of us at this point in time.
Dr. Murray, we're going to zone down in some current affairs. State of Ministry of Health and Medicine and the non-renewal of young doctors' contract in the system.
Yes, that is a very vexing issue, certainly for many young doctors, and it became something that was particularly acute last year. It is also a current issue now, but I get the impression that it is not as bad this year as it was last year. I think basically what happened was that the government would have told us, or would have said, that there were more doctors than there were posts for doctors. All right, so that was one part of the explanation. Of course, many of us would have said that the posts that there are for doctors in the various hospitals probably are too few, because many hospitals, if you speak to the rank and file young doctors, senior doctors at the hospitals, they will probably tell you that, boy, we need more doctors, working in the system. So most people would think that the number of posts are probably not necessarily adequate in most hospitals. That is one thing. The second thing is that in recent years, as I've said, we've graduated many more doctors than previously. For example, when I was in medical school, many years ago, 30 odd years ago, my medical school class was like 110. And in those days, the maximum would be maybe between 110 and 120, right? And about half of that class would be Jamaicans.
Yes.
So each year would graduate like about 55 doctors. Contrast that to now. Now I think the medical school class is in excess of 300 Jamaicans. Yes, about 300 Jamaicans, maybe a little bit more. So each year they're graduating a lot of young medical doctors. One of the reasons why it was not an issue up until last year was migration, because many young doctors, you know, they're young, they're adventurous, they want to see the world, they figure they can make you know, more money abroad. And yes, so many young doctors would, as a matter of course, end up going to the United States, Canada, and England. All right, all you have to do is study for your exams, and if you pass your exams, then you can apply to, you know, to enter the various systems. So that used to be one of the pathways in terms of career advancement for young doctors. Of course, we all know what happened with COVID. When COVID came into being, country lockdown, everybody locked down. So that outlet suddenly wasn't there.
So there's a saturation.
So, exactly. So you have a lot of doctors now who couldn't go abroad. All right. So there were now more young doctors competing for, you know, the relatively few posts.
Yes.
That is basically, I think, what happened. One of the reasons why the ministry sort of address the situation last year is because of the needs of COVID. Because of course COVID means that you have a lot more patients coming into the hospital, and therefore requiring medical care. Because of COVID, there was seen to be a need to employ more doctors to deal with the increased burden, the increased patient burden on the hospital. So, you know, the government looked and, you know, rationalized and said, well, okay, we'll employ a lot of these young doctors to help in the management of the increased numbers of COVID patients. And I think that worked out well. That was a clever move. That was a necessary move.
Okay.
Of course, COVID is still with us. COVID is still with us. And of course, recently, after a couple of months where it seemed as if things were going down, government opened up the country, and maybe almost predictably the numbers have risen acutely again. So we are now in a state where we certainly are dealing with a large number of patients in hospitals. Of course, the need for doctors to help in that regard in terms of managing these patients. So, I mean, I don't know what is being worked out, but I suppose that similar to last year, they may very well do something which is similar in this current year as well. Interestingly though, many countries, even though COVID is still with us, many countries have opened up somewhat. The United States, Canada, England to a certain extent. So doctors are now leaving our shores again to seek their fortunes and their professional development in other countries again. Okay. So the situation is probably not quite as bad as it was last year.
Yes.
But of course there'll be a few persons who have found themselves in a situation where, you know, they can't find work, which is very, very unfortunate. And I suspect that there may be some relief coming up in terms of employing doctors, because COVID has now surged again in the country. So there you have it. Of course, many of us still think that the number of posts that are available in the various hospitals in the medical system, the public medical system, needs to be increased. And that in itself would also be able to accommodate you know, some of the young doctors that we have out there.
So what's your advice to a doctor who's without contract now?
that is a very, very loaded question. The fact is, at the end of the day, it is going to be a competitive situation, you know, and as with any competitive situation, you have to take the bulls by the horn. You have to be proactive. You know, you have to create the links and make the links and do the rounds, talk to, you know, the various heads of departments and SMOs and CEOs at the various hospitals. You know, because if you have that sort of mindset, you know, that I'm not giving up, I'm really going to,
like a hustler.
Exactly. That is probably what it takes to get your foot in the door. in the face of there being a lot of competition.
Yes.
Of course, the other aspect is a long-term aspect. When you are going through medical school and when you are doing your internship, you have to already have the mindset that, look, this might be a competitive field, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
So I have to do the best that I can
do.
I have to impress, you know, the senior people around me so that I can get good references, you know, so that it will be easier for me to go on and get jobs when the time comes. It might require working harder and showing the people that, boy, I'm not afraid of work. I'm willing to go above and beyond the call of duty. And when they see that you have that sort of work ethic and that dedication, you know, to work, and you have a high quality, high standard of work, then you make it easier for yourself. You know, so you have to have a long-term outlook. That's why, you know, I'm here in this little internship job. You know, I want to get over it as quickly as possible, do the least amount of work as possible. No, you can't have that mindset. You always have to be thinking of the future. And similarly, you always have to try to increase your own qualification. Meaning, if there are little courses around that you can do as a young doctor, go and do them. It might cost a little money, but that will help you to have a better CV, you know. So things like those are always very, very important in this sort of climate where competition is high and competition is increasing.
Question: what kind of business can these doctors venture in? Say they have done the internship, they're without a contract. Is there here that they can go in terms of business?
Right. So you in medicine you have the, I suppose, the age-old, tried and proven route of private practice. All right. So just about the vast majority, I wouldn't say every specialist, but the vast majority of specialists would have the facility available of going into private practice, whether full-time or part-time, meaning you are practicing outside of the government service in your own private capacity, treating patients and, you know, being remunerated accordingly. All right, so that is almost a standard part of medicine. Of course, you know of many young doctors who have various offices all over the place. All right, you also know of many private hospitals, you know, all over the place as well. And private hospitals will partner with doctors in terms of providing a service for patients, clearly at a cost. And that is how many doctors would either supplement their income, or that would be the sum total of their income, because that is all they do. Of course, you now have young entrepreneurs. So you have entrepreneurs going into telemedicine. You have entrepreneurs going into the medical legal field, where they advise people read medical legal matters, or you know, they work with lawyers and so on. You have many young doctors who will open a little medical center, right, where you know you can access a variety of medical services across a wide variety of specialties. One of the important things that you'll see going on now is where it pertains to investigations, right? Because investigations is a big part of medicine, whether it is X-ray, CT, MRI, ultrasounds, and other forms of investigations. You know, as medicine unfolds, you know, persons have branched out into these fields to offer private services where these things are concerned. So those are some of the areas that people have been branching out into as business prospects. And I'm sure young, modern young doctors, you know, their minds are always working, are always turning over. You know, what is a potential business opportunity here? What is a potential business opportunity there? So, you know, it might be that the sky is the limit, and my rusty old mind cannot conceive of some of the new opportunities that might be out there for them. Yeah, that's reality. That's a fact of life, you know. But Yeah, that is but the fact of the matter is that there are opportunities, as in any other field. Once you sit down and you think about it, and you're willing to explore and go the extra mile, you can find opportunities out there.
Yeah, excellent. Dr. Moore, what do you do for fun?
Starting from back in my school days, I was always somebody who was involved in sports. The bones have become a little bit too old for the sports now, but I have to keep myself healthy, so I primarily football and track and field. Those were my two passions. I didn't have very much skill, so the football was just to get a good run, but I had a little bit more talent in track and field, so that is what I would have gravitated towards, representing school, representing university, in track and field. And that sort of attention to fitness and so on had stayed with me throughout life. So even though I'm not running up and down competitively, I've always thought that it was important to keep fit, because there are many benefits to keeping yourself fit. You feel better, you sleep better, your health is improved, your concentration levels are improved, your muscles are stronger. There are so many benefits to keeping yourself in shape. You keep your weight down. And of course, the older you get, the more likely you are to be putting on a bit of weight. So there are a lot of benefits. So I have continued that particular part of my life, making sure that I stay fit. So I'll exercise multiple times for the week, whether it is jogging or doing exercises. And in the same way that we are doing our YouTube video, they have so many exercise videos on YouTube where you can do a half an hour, an hour worth of exercise. So those are some of the things I utilize. I also there's a sport called squash, a racket sport. I used to play that very regularly, but since COVID started, and yes, I had to give that up. So that is no longer in the picture. That might very well restart at some point in the future. And the other thing I do is that I read a lot. Multiple sources, whether it's both fiction, non-fiction. I find it very stimulating, and it's also a way to gain knowledge. So I do a lot of reading. Even online, you have access to so much information online, so if I come across something that I say, oh, I don't understand too much about this thing, I'll Google it and try to find out about it. So that inquisitiveness has stayed with me from my younger days. Back in the old days, people used to have encyclopedia. I don't know if you guys know about encyclopedia.
I know about
a whole set of books. Nowadays you don't have to have encyclopedia. You can just go and Google and find out about whatever topic it is. So yeah, between reading and staying fit, those are my interests. Of course, my spiritual interests are very important and foundational in my life. So all my Christian principles, going to church, fellowshipping with fellow believers, these are important things in the totality of my life, to hopefully give it some amount of roundedness.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Viewers, subscribers, I hope you enjoy. Just remember, like, share, comment, subscribe, spread the word. Thank you again. And Dr. Murray, I just want to say thanks, because I know that you're a doctor who cares for persons who are less fortunate. So I just want to give you the credit right now. I know persons reach out to you from time to time asking you advice, and you have assisted a lot of persons free of charge. So just giving your roses and flowers from now, and I know you're one of the influencers in the field of medicine. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Appreciate it.